Welcome back to another video, guys. Today we're going to be talking about Steve Kerr claiming that he plans on having Klay Thompson defend power forwards in a lineup alongside Chris Paul, Stephen Curry, Kevon Looney, and Andrew Wiggins. That's a whole lot to unpack, but the most important thing to realize is that at a solid 6'7", 212 to 220-ish pounds, Klay Thompson isn't as light or as weak as many people believe him to be. The other important thing to keep note of is the fact that the league has progressed to a point where the power forwards and the bigs of the past are not the same ones that you see in today's game. You see a lot more wiry ones, a lot more, yes, athletic ones, but with a little bit less in the strength and bulky size kind of department, and more so in the finesse, getting shots up, and range department, which does bode well for that lineup for Steve Kerr to run. All things considered, this provides an extremely strong shooting floor for this team that makes them almost an offensive juggernaut while not completely annihilating them on the defensive side of the floor. This obviously can't be run against every team, but for the most part, Andrew Wiggins can take on certain offensive players that Klay Thompson is just less apt to deal with. Obviously, post year in and year out injury that have ended his seasons twice before, Klay Thompson isn't as quick or as durable as he once was. That being said, you need Andrew Wiggins to go ahead and cover those assignments when you face off against those players. The thought process is still, though, that it would take forever and it just wouldn't make sense to have Klay Thompson guarding power forwards. But when you consider that you can have such a great shooting lineup as the one that I mentioned before, with the exception of obviously Kevon Looney, but he serves as more of a rebounder and a clean up the glass kind of artist anyways. Understanding that, as long as you can scheme your guards between Steph Curry and Chris Paul, who is in the latter stages of his career, so while a defensive oriented guard and more of a pure point, he isn't exactly the complete lockdown guard that he once was, and his height and length are slightly becoming more of an obvious liability in today's day and age. With that being said, I believe that having those shooters on the floor would help mitigate the impact that opposing offenses could inflict damage-wise, whether they get a favorable matchup against the guard or if they end up getting a switch and Klay Thompson just isn't able to hold his own. That being said, there was a list put together by multiple people that I saw on social media where they were detailing essentially the type of bigs that he would have to go up against, and naturally, since we understand that Wiggins would end up taking certain ones, somebody decided to compile a list and just explain how their thought process worked. Hey there, if you made it this far into the video, first of all, I want to say I appreciate it. Second of all, go ahead and subscribe, man. Only 12% of you guys are subscribed to the channel, and by subscribing, you let the algorithm know that more people need to see the video on their pages, which allows us to grow the community and allows me to push out better content than you've ever seen. Without any further ado, let's get back into the video. Now, obviously, for a team like the Kings, you know, you have your Keegan Murrays, you have your Domantas Sabonis, but Sabonis runs the 5. So Klay really wouldn't have to worry about him except for in a really rough switch situation, but he should be able to hold his own just well enough to not completely get annihilated every single time it should occur. That being said, they believe that it would be unnecessary to force a switch between Klay and Wiggins and running Wiggins at the 4 guarding the power forward in that matchup. Against the Clippers, they said a similar thing because obviously they tend to have Nick Batum at that 4 spot, and while that may change this upcoming season just depending on what kind of lineup they decide to run, they don't have a second Zubac at that power forward spot, so it's not necessarily an issue. When it comes to the Lakers, obviously Wiggins is going to have to guard LeBron because despite being in year 21 in the league, LeBron is still far more athletic than Klay Thompson was at any point in his career. Against Phoenix, since they do have Kevin Durant running the power forward spot, it is extremely likely that you will end up seeing Andrew Wiggins guarding KD, even though that won't obviously stop him because it's very much impossible to stop him. It's making it more difficult for him to get an easy bucket. Now, in a different lineup, they said that they would end up probably having Draymond on the court when they play Milwaukee, because they don't have the personnel necessarily to stop Giannis. But Klay Thompson is definitely not the guy that you want on Giannis in any situation, way, shape, or form. Just because of Giannis's sheer bruising style of play, it's not ideal or conducive to success when you match him up against Klay Thompson, who is a shooter that would like to stay as non-bruised as possible in order to get his shots and get his rhythm and maintain his focus on the offensive side of the ball. Lastly, against Denver, obviously there's Aaron Gordon, who does play more of a Kevon Looney role, if you will, with that team, but nevertheless, he is more of a stocky bruiser type of player. That's not ideal for Klay Thompson at all, and honestly, not even Andrew Wiggins. While the athleticism kind of matches, Wiggins just quite simply isn't big enough or strong enough to handle that load consistently on a night in, night out basis. So in a matchup like that, you would expect that Draymond Green would actually end up being on the floor and he would be the person to guard Aaron Gordon. Looking outside of those teams specifically, you're going to see a lot of non-playoff or finals type teams, and you don't really care. I'm not going to say you don't really care so much how those outcomes of those matchups go, but you can live with Klay Thompson not having a superb night against a team like the Charlotte Hornets at the power forward spot, because either A, there's not going to be a super dangerous player at the power forward spot, or they're just not going to have an issue as far as winning that game and the outcome of the game. Because at the end of the day, there's a very short list of great power forwards in the league today that can affect the outcome of a game. So even if Klay Thompson does struggle against certain power forwards, it's not as though the supporting cast around them is going to carry the team to the W against the Warriors. Understanding that, I do see what Steve Kerr was cooking up, and it does make sense to me that it is something that could potentially pay dividends as long as the shooting output from Klay Thompson and the other guards on the court ends up running the way that it should, ideally. With that being said, you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and as always, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.